He walked in like he owned the city suit, tailored in Milan eyes cold as ice, and a bodyguard who had been by his side for a decade. Adrian Volkov thought he was untouchable. He thought he was sitting down for just another business dinner at the most exclusive table in Chicago. But he didn't know that the man standing behind his right shoulder had just sold him for $10 million. He didn't know that his next sip of scotch was supposed to be his last. The only thing standing between the most dangerous Mafia don and a shallow grave. A waitress nobody noticed until she slipped him a napkin that changed everything. The Onyx room didn't smell like food. It smelled of old money, heavy perfume, and the kind of hushed secrets that could topple governments. For Sienna Brooks, it just smelled like another 12-hour shift on her feet. She adjusted the collar of her uniform, pulling her hair back tighter. At 24, Sienna had mastered the art of being invisible. In a place like this, the clientele didn't pay for the food. They paid for discretion. They paid so that people like Sienna would refill their wine glasses without hearing the insider trading tips or the infidelity confessions being whispered over Wagyu beef. But Sienna always heard. It was a habit she couldn't break, a leftover survival instinct from a life she had buried 3 years ago. Table 4, the floor manager. Henri snapped, shoving a tray of crystal tumblers into her hands. VIP, do not make eye contact, do not speak unless spoken to. It's Volkov. The kitchen went silent for a split second. Even the chefs paused their chopping. Adrian Volkov. The name carried a weight that pressed down on the lungs. He wasn't just a businessman. He was the ghost that haunted Chicago's shipping yards and high-rises. Rumor had it he had taken over the Russian-American syndicate at 25 after his father was gunned down, and he had ruled with a terrifying, calculated silence ever since. Sienna took a breath, stabilized the tray, and walked out onto the floor. Table 4 was in the alcove, the most secluded spot in the restaurant, draped in shadows. Adrian Volkov sat with his back to the wall, standard protocol for a man with a target on his back. He was devastatingly handsome, in a way that felt dangerous. Sharp jawline, dark hair swept back, and eyes the color of stormy seas that scanned the room with predatory precision. Standing behind him was his shadow. Kieran. A mountain of a man who had been Volkov's head of security for years. Kieran was usually a statue, but tonight, as Sienna approached, she noticed something off. It was micro-movements. A twitch in Kieran's jaw, the way his hand brushed the hilt of the concealed Sig Sauer under his jacket, not in readiness, but in a nervous tick. "Your drink, sir," Sienna said softly, placing the coaster down. Adrian didn't look up. He was busy scrolling through a tablet, his demeanor calm, almost bored. "Leave the bottle." His voice was a low baritone that vibrated through the air. Sienna reached across to place the bottle of Macallan 25 on the table. As she did, the polished mirrored surface of the decorative column next to the table caught her eye. It reflected the screen of the phone Kieran was holding behind his back, just out of Adrian's line of sight. A text message flashed on the screen. The brightness was turned down low, but Sienna's eyesight was 20/20. Payment received. 10 p.m. No witnesses. Sienna's blood ran cold. She checked her watch. It was 9:48 p.m. She pulled back her heart, hammering against her ribs like a trapped bird. She looked at Kieran. He was sweating. Just a thin sheen on his forehead, despite the restaurant being kept at a crisp 68 degrees. He wasn't guarding Adrian. He was waiting for the slaughter. She moved away from the table, her mind racing. This wasn't her business. If she intervened, she was dead. If she didn't intervene, the man in the charcoal suit would be dead in 12 minutes. She went to the service station, hands trembling as she grabbed a fresh napkin. She looked back at table 4. Adrian took a sip of his drink, completely unaware that the man who had sworn to take a bullet for him was the one pulling the trigger. Sienna remembered the code she lived by, the reason she was hiding in Chicago in the first place. Injustice thrives when the good do nothing. She grabbed a black ink pen. She couldn't speak to him, Kieran would hear. She couldn't signal him Kieran was watching the room. It had to be right under the traitor's nose. She wrote rapidly, pressing hard enough to indent the paper, but trying to keep her hand steady. Your bodyguard sold you out. You are the payment. 10 p.m. She folded the napkin into a tight square, placed it under the heavy base of a fresh water glass, and took a deep breath. This was it. She was walking back into the lion's den, and she was about to poke the beast. The walk back to table 4 felt like walking through underwater currents. The sounds of the restaurant, clinking silverware, soft jazz laughter, faded into a dull roar in Sienna's ears. She approached the table. 9:52 p.m. 8 minutes left. Water, sir, Sienna said, her voice steady, betraying none of the terror gripping her chest. She placed the glass down directly in front of Adrian, lifting his half-empty whiskey glass to refill it, forcing him to look at the new setup. She tapped the base of the water glass with her index finger twice, a sharp, deliberate movement. For the first time, Adrian Volkov looked at her. His eyes met hers. Time seemed to suspend. He saw a waitress in a generic black uniform, but he also saw the dilation of her pupils, the slight flush of adrenaline on her neck. He looked down at the glass. He saw the white corner of the napkin protruding from underneath the heavy crystal. Most men would have ignored it. Most men would have waved her away. But Adrian Volkov didn't survive to 30 by ignoring anomalies. He didn't reach for the napkin immediately. That would alert Kieran. Instead, he picked up the water glass, taking a slow sip, and palmed the napkin in his left hand with the dexterity of a magician. He brought his hand under the table, unfolding it by feel, then glanced down for a fraction of a second while pretending to check his watch. Sienna watched him. She was holding her breath. Adrian's expression didn't change. Not a muscle twitched. He was terrifyingly composed. But the air around him shifted. The temperature dropped 10 degrees. The bored businessman vanished, and the predator woke up. He slowly turned his head to the right, looking up at Kieran. "Kieran," Adrian said. His voice was conversational light. "Boss." Kieran answered, his eyes scanning the front door. "How long have we known each other?" Kieran blinked, confused by the sentimental question. 12 years, boss, since the sprawling yards in Jersey." 12 years, Adrian repeated. He swirled the amber liquid in his glass. A long time to build loyalty. An even longer time to build a price tag. Sienna froze. He was confronting him. "Now, here." Kieran shifted his weight. "I don't follow." "I'm feeling generous tonight," Adrian said, unbuttoning his suit jacket. "Why don't you sit down, have a drink with me?" "I'm on the clock, Adrian. Protocol." Kieran said, his voice tightening. "Protocol," Adrian scoffed. He poured a second glass of scotch. "Sit. Down." The command wasn't shouted, but it cracked like a whip. Kieran hesitated, his hand hovering near his waist. He looked at the clock. 9:55 p.m. "Sit," Adrian repeated, his eyes locking onto Kieran's. Kieran sat. He looked like a man trying to hold on to a crumbling cliff edge. "Drink," Adrian commanded, sliding the glass toward him. As Kieran reached for the glass, Adrian's hand shot out. It was a blur of motion, too fast for the human eye to track comfortably. He slammed Kieran's hand onto the table, pinning it there with a grip like iron. With his other hand, Adrian tossed the crumbled napkin onto the table. "Care to explain why the waitress knows more about my schedule than you do?" Adrian whispered, leaning in. Kieran's face went pale. He yanked his hand back, reaching for his gun with his free hand. "Get down!" Adrian roared, flipping the heavy oak table sideways, as a shield, just as the front windows of the onyx room shattered inward. Bullets tore through the air, shredding the velvet upholstery where Adrian had been sitting milliseconds ago. Sienna screamed, diving behind the service station counter as shards of glass rained down like diamonds. The extraction team wasn't waiting for 10 p.m. They were here early. "Cover fire!" Kieran shouted, scrambling away from the table, pulling his gun, not to defend Adrian but to pin him down. Adrian was weaponless. He had checked his gun at the coat checker requirement for the dinner meeting he was supposed to have. He was trapped behind the overturned table, pinned by automatic fire from the doorway, and his own treacherous bodyguard flanking him from the right. Sienna looked around. The floor staff was cowering. The patrons were screaming. She saw Adrian look around for a weapon, finding nothing but a steak knife. She looked at the fire alarm pull station on the wall next to her. Then she looked at the service bar. Under the counter, Henry kept a sawed-off shotgun for unruly drunks. Henry was currently sobbing under a table. Sienna didn't think. She moved. She slid across the floor, staying low glass, slicing into her palms. She reached the bar, grabbed the shotgun and racked it. The sound was distinct, ch-chunk. Kieran heard it. He turned toward the bar, raising his Sig Sauer. "You stupid bee! Boom!" Sienna fired. She didn't aim to kill. She aimed for the structure. The buckshot tore through the heavy chandelier chain above Kieran's head. The massive crystal fixture crashed down, burying the traitor under a mountain of glass and brass. Silence fell for a heartbeat. Adrian Volkov rose from behind the table, dusting glass off his shoulder. He looked at the pile of rubble that used to be his head of security. Then he turned his gaze to the bar. Sienna stood there, breathing heavy, holding the shotgun, with a stance that was far too professional for a waitress. Adrian walked toward her, ignoring the chaos, ignoring the sirens wailing in the distance. He stopped 2 feet in front of her. His eyes were intense, burning with a mix of fury and fascination. "Who the hell are you?" he demanded. "Just a waitress who wants her tip," Sienna quipped, though her hands were shaking. Adrian stared at her, then grabbed her hand. "You just started a war, sweetheart, and you're coming with me." "I'm not going anywhere with you," Sienna argued. "Look at the door," Adrian pointed. More men were pouring in. The hit squad. "You saved my life," Adrian said, his voice grim. "That makes you a target. You live in my world now." He didn't wait for permission. He grabbed her hand, pulled her toward the kitchen exit, and they ran into the cold Chicago night, leaving her old life in shattered pieces on the floor of the onyx room. The engine of the matte black Aston Martin roared like a wounded beast as Adrian tore down Lakeshore Drive. The city lights smeared into streaks of neon gold and blood red against the windshield. Sienna gripped the leather handle above the passenger door, her knuckles turning white. The shotgun, the one she had used to bring down a chandelier, was gone, left behind in the chaotic alleyway, where Adrian had dragged her into the car. Now she was armed with nothing but her wits, and a terrifying realization she had just kidnapped herself. "You missed the turn," Sienna said, her voice trembling slightly, though she hated the sound of it. "The police station is back that way." Adrian didn't look at her. His profile was carved from granite, illuminated intermittently by the passing street lamps. His grip on the steering wheel was relaxed, terrifyingly, so for a man doing 110 miles per hour in a 45 zone. "We aren't going to the police," Adrian said calmly. "You said I was a target," Sienna snapped, finding a reservoir of anger to combat the fear. "The police can protect me." Adrian let out a dark, humorless chuckle. It was a sound that made the hair on Sienna's arms stand up. "Sweetheart, half the Chicago PD is on my payroll. The other half is on the payroll of the man who just tried to kill me. If I drop you at a precinct, you won't make it to the holding cell. You'll hang yourself within the hour." Sienna fell silent. The reality of his words settled over her like a heavy, suffocating blanket. She knew who Adrian Volkov was. Everyone in Chicago knew. But knowing the myth and sitting next to the man were two very different things. He smelled of gunpowder, expensive scotch, and metallic blood. "You're bleeding," she noted, glancing at his left arm. The crisp white dress shirt was stained crimson at the bicep, soaked through the charcoal suit jacket. A graze from a bullet, or maybe a shard of glass from the explosion. "I've had worse," he dismissed. "Check the glove compartment. There's a burner phone. Turn it on." Sienna hesitated, then opened the compartment. Inside lay a black flip phone and a loaded Glock 19. She ignored the gun, grabbing the phone. "Dial the number saved as the Architect," Adrian commanded, swerving effortlessly around a slow-moving taxi. Sienna did as she was told. It rang once. "Status." A voice answered instantly. It was mechanical, distorted. "Kieran is burned," Adrian said, his voice void of emotion. "The Onyx room is compromised. Initiate Protocol 0. I'm bringing a package to the Spire." "Understood. Cleaning crew is en route to the restaurant. You have 10 minutes before the perimeter locks down." The line went dead. "The Spire?" Sienna asked as she closed the phone. "My home," Adrian said. Or at least the one place Kieran didn't have the security codes for. 10 minutes later, the Aston Martin screeched into the private underground garage of the Millennium Spire, one of the tallest residential buildings in the city. The garage was empty, stark, and sterile. Adrian killed the engine, and the silence that followed was deafening. He turned to her, then the adrenaline fading just enough to let the pain show in his eyes. He looked at her, really looked at her for the second time that night. "Give me your purse," he demanded. "What now?" Sienna clutched her worn leather bag to her chest. It contained her entire life, her fake ID, her meager cash tips, a picture of her father. Adrian didn't argue. He reached over his movement, swift despite his injury, and snatched the bag. He opened the door, stepped out, and dumped the contents onto the concrete floor. "Hey!" Sienna scrambled out of the car, furious. Adrian ignored her. He kicked her phone across the garage. He stomped on her key fob. Then he picked up the small tracking device he found concealed in the lining of her bag, a generic AirTag she used for her keys. He crushed it under the heel of his Italian dress shoe. "You can't be tracked," he said, tossing the empty bag back to her. "If they find you, they find me, and I am not in the mood to die tonight." "You owe me a new phone," she hissed, gathering her scattered belongings. "I owe you my life," Adrian corrected his voice, dropping an octave. He stepped closer, crowding her space. He towered over her, radiating heat and danger. "But right now, I'm trying to figure out if that's a debt I want to pay." "What is that supposed to mean?" "It means," Adrian whispered, leaning down until his face was inches from hers. "Waitresses don't know how to rack a shotgun without flinching. Waitresses don't check for exits before they check for tips. And waitresses definitely don't spot a micro-text on a bodyguard's phone from 10 feet away in a dimly lit room." His eyes searched hers, looking for a crack in the armor. "Who are you really, Sienna?" Sienna held his gaze. She had spent 3 years lying to everyone she met. She wasn't about to break now. "I'm the girl who just saved your ungrateful ass. That's who I am." Adrian stared at her for a long moment. Then surprisingly the corner of his mouth twitched upward. It wasn't a smile exactly. It was an acknowledgement. "Fair enough," he said, turning toward the private elevator. "Come on. If we stay down here any longer, the motion sensors will trigger the turrets." "The what?" "Joke," Adrian said dryly as the elevator doors slid open. "Mostly." The penthouse was a fortress of glass and steel, hovering 60 floors above the city. It was beautiful cold and entirely devoid of personal touches. No photos, no plants, no warmth, just sprawling views of the Chicago skyline and furniture that looked like it cost more than Sienna's lifetime earnings. Adrian threw his jacket onto a white leather sofa, wincing as the movement pulled at his wound. The blood flow had increased. He swayed slightly, his complexion turning grey. Sienna's instinct overrode her wariness. She was trained for this, not as a waitress, but from the life she had left behind. "Sit down," she ordered, pointing to the kitchen island. "Do you have a first aid kit?" "Master bathroom. Under the sink," Adrian gritted out, gripping the counter. Sienna ran. She returned in 30 seconds with a tactical medical kit, not the kind you buy at a pharmacy, but the kind used by field medics. She laid out the supplies, gauze, antiseptic, sutures. "This is going to sting," she warned, cutting away his shirt sleeve with trauma shears. The wound was ugly, a deep gash across the deltoid muscle where a bullet had grazed him. It needed stitches. Adrian watched her as she worked. He didn't flinch when she poured the alcohol over the raw flesh. He just watched her hands. They were steady, precise. She cleaned the wound with an efficiency that betrayed her. "You have medical training," he stated. It wasn't a question. "I watched a lot of Grey's Anatomy." Sienna lied, threading a suture needle. "Liar," Adrian murmured. The pain was making him hazy, stripping away his filters. "You hold that needle like a surgeon." "Hold still," she commanded, pushing the needle through his skin. He hissed a breath through his teeth, but didn't move. The silence in the penthouse was heavy, charged with a strange intimacy. Here was the most feared man in the city, bleeding in his kitchen completely, at the mercy of a woman whose last name he didn't even know was fake. "Why did you do it?" Adrian asked softly, as she tied off the third stitch. "You could have walked away. You could have let Kieran kill me." Sienna paused. She looked at the blood on her hands. His blood. "I hate bullies," she said quietly. "And I hate traitors even more." "Is that right?" Adrian's eyes bored into hers. "And which one am I?" "You're the bully," she said, cutting the thread. "Kieran was the traitor. I just decided you were the lesser of two evils." Adrian laughed, then a genuine rich sound that surprised them both. "The lesser of two evils. I've been called a lot of things, Sienna. That's a new one." He reached out his hand, covering hers. His palm was rough, calloused warm. The contact sent a jolt of electricity straight up Sienna's arm. She froze. "Thank you," he said. The arrogance was gone, replaced by a raw intensity. "Don't thank me yet." Sienna pulled her hand away, stepping back. "We're trapped in a sky-high cage. Half the city wants you dead. And I have a feeling Kieran wasn't working alone." Adrian's face hardened instantly. The mask was back. "No," he said, standing up and testing his arm. "He wasn't. Kieran was ambitious, but he wasn't smart enough to orchestrate a hit inside the Onyx room. Someone bankrolled him. Someone powerful." He walked to the massive floor-to-ceiling window, looking out at the city that was trying to swallow him whole. "And until I find out who," Adrian vowed, his voice cold as ice, "Chicago is going to burn." Morning arrived with a grey, suffocating fog that blanketed the city. Sienna hadn't slept. She sat curled in a massive armchair in the living room, watching the news on a muted 80-inch television screen. The headline was flashing in bold red, shooting at the Onyx room. "Mafia boss missing." Mystery woman sought for questioning. They had a picture of her. It was grainy, taken from a security camera across the street as they ran. But it was undeniable. Sienna Brooks was now the most wanted woman in Illinois. "Coffee," a voice said behind her. Sienna jumped. Adrian was standing there, dressed in fresh clothes, black jeans, and a black turtleneck that hid the bandages. He looked rested, dangerous, and irritatingly calm. He held out a steaming mug. "They're calling me an accomplice," Sienna said, ignoring the coffee. "They think I helped you escape. The police are calling it a kidnapping gone wrong." "Better an accomplice than a corpse," Adrian said, setting the mug down on the table next to her. "Drink, you look terrible." "Thanks," she muttered, taking the cup. It was black strong and exactly what she needed. "I made some calls," Adrian said, pacing the room. "Kieran is dead. The police found his body under the chandelier, but his phone, the one you saw, was missing. Someone cleaned the scene before the cops got there," Sienna realized. "Exactly. Which means the mole is deep inside my organization. Whoever paid Kieran has access to my cleanup crews." Adrian stopped pacing and turned to her. "I need eyes I can trust, eyes that aren't on my payroll." "You want me?" Sienna guessed, incredulous. "I'm a waitress, Adrian. I serve pasta. I don't hunt moles." "Stop lying," Adrian snapped. The sudden aggression made her spill a little coffee. "I ran your fingerprints off the glass you used last night." Sienna's heart stopped. She carefully set the mug down. And nothing. Adrian said, his eyes narrowing. "No record, no driver's license, no birth certificate, no parking tickets. You don't exist, Sienna, which means Sienna Brooks is a ghost." He walked toward her, slow and predatory. Normal people leave a paper trail. Only people running from something or someone scrub their history that clean. Sienna stood up, meeting his gaze. She was done hiding. If she was going to die in this penthouse, she would die with her name. "My name isn't Sienna," she said clearly. Adrian stopped. "Go on." "My name is Elena Vance." The name hung in the air like smoke. Adrian's expression shifted from suspicion to shock. "Vance," he repeated. "As in Arthur Vance." The forensic accountant who testified against the Moretti crime family 3 years ago. The man who was blown up in his car 3 days before the trial. Elena corrected, her voice brittle. "Everyone thought I was in the car with him. I wasn't. I was in the house. I saw the man who planted the bomb." Adrian swore softly in Russian. He ran a hand through his hair. "The Morettis? That explains the skills. You've been on the run from the Italian syndicate for 3 years." "I learned to shoot because I had to," Elena said, her chin high. "I learned field medicine because I couldn't go to hospitals without flagging my ID. I'm not a spy, Adrian. I'm a survivor." Adrian looked at her with a newfound respect. The Moretti family was his biggest rival. If the Morettis had taken out Arthur Vance, and now Kieran was taking payment to kill Adrian, the Morettis paid Kieran, Adrian deduced. They're making a play for the city. They take me out. They take my territory. "And since I'm the only witness to Kieran's betrayal," Elena said, "they'll be coming for me too. Again." "They think you're dead," Adrian said. "But the news just showed your face to the world. It won't take long for the Morettis to recognize the daughter of the man they murdered." He walked over to a wall safe hidden behind a painting, punched in a code, and pulled out a heavy stack of cash and a secure tablet. "We have a problem, Elena," Adrian said, using her real name for the first time. It sounded intimate, dangerous on his tongue. "I can't fight a war on 2 fronts. I need to purge my organization of traitors, and I need to stop the Morettis. I can't do that if I'm worrying about you getting snatched." "I can take care of myself," she argued. "Against a street thug, maybe. Against a hit squad. No." Adrian slammed the safe shut. "We need a cover, a reason for you to be by my side 24/7, without raising suspicion among my men while I investigate them." He turned to her, a plan forming in his cold, tactical mind. "We're getting married," he stated. Elena choked on air. "Excuse me. Not legally, but publicly," Adrian clarified. "The media is already spinning a story about the mystery woman. We control the narrative. You aren't a hostage. You're my fiancé. We were at dinner to celebrate. The attack was an attempt to ruin our happiness." "That is the most insane idea I have ever heard," Elena said, pacing away from him. "Think about it," Adrian pressed. "If you are the future Mrs. Volkov, my men, the loyal ones, will die to protect you. It gives me a reason to keep you in the penthouse in my car in my meetings. It brings you into the fold. And it puts a giant target on my back." "You already have a target on your back," Adrian roared, closing the distance. He grabbed her shoulders, forcing her to look at him. "The Morettis know you're alive now. They will hunt you down. If you run, you die alone in a ditch. If you stay with me, we fight them together. You want justice for your father. This is how you get it. You help me destroy the Morettis." Elena looked into his stormy grey eyes. She saw the ruthlessness there, but also a fierce protectiveness. She hated the Mafia. She hated everything he stood for. But he was right. The Morettis had taken everything from her. Her father, her future, her name. Adrian Volkov was a monster, but he was a monster who wanted to eat the other monsters. "A fake engagement," Elena clarified, her voice steady. "Strictly business," Adrian nodded. "We convince the world. We convince my men. We flush out the rats. And when it's over, I give you $10 million and a new identity in any country you want." Elena took a deep breath. She thought about the explosion that killed her father. She thought about the 3 years of sleeping in motels and waiting tables. "I don't want the money," Elena said softly. "Then what do you want?" "I want the man who planted the bomb," she said, her eyes cold. "I want to pull the trigger." Adrian stared at her, seeing the darkness that matched his own. A slow smile spread across his face. It wasn't a nice smile. It was the smile of a devil finding a partner. "Deal," Adrian said. He reached into his pocket and pulled out a ring. It was a family heirloom, a massive diamond set in platinum that he had taken from the safe. He took her left hand. "This is going to be heavy," he warned. He slid the ring onto her finger. It fit perfectly. "Welcome to the family, Elena," he whispered. Just then, the elevator chimed. Adrian spun around, positioning himself in front of Elena, his gun appearing in his hand as if by magic. The doors slid open. A young man in a tactical suit stepped out, hands raised. "Don't shoot, boss, it's Dante." Adrian lowered the gun slightly, but didn't holster it. "Dante, you're late." "I had to shake a tail," Dante said, stepping into the room. He looked at Elena, then at the ring on her finger. His eyes widened. Boss. The captains are demanding a sit-down. They heard rumors you were hit. They want to know if you're fit to lead. Or tell them to meet me at the warehouse. In 1 hour, Adrian said. He put an arm around Elena's waist, pulling her flush against his hard body. She stiffened, but didn't pull away. "And Dante," Adrian added, "tell them to bring gifts. I'm introducing them to the future Queen of Chicago." Dante's jaw dropped. "Serious, deadly," Adrian said. As Dante retreated to the elevator, Adrian looked down at Elena. The heat of his body was seeping into hers. "Showtime, darling," he whispered against her ear. "Don't blink. The wolves are coming." The warehouse in the Southside Industrial District was a cathedral of rust and shadows. It was where the Volkov organization handled internal disputes. Rain hammered against the corrugated metal roof, creating a rhythmic, deafening drumbeat that masked the sound of arriving SUVs. Inside, 5 men sat around a circular table, illuminated by a single swaying bulb. These were the capos, the captains who controlled the drugs, the ports, and the unions for Adrian Volkov. When the heavy iron doors groaned open, the conversation stopped. Adrian walked in first, his stride eating up the distance. He wore a fresh suit, midnight blue, tailored to conceal the gun holstered at his ribs and the bandages on his arm. But he wasn't alone. Elena walked beside him. She wore a dress Dante had procured on short notice, a sleek black silk slip dress that hugged her curves like a second skin paired with a heavy trench coat draped over her shoulders. She looked expensive. She looked dangerous. She looked like she belonged. But inside, Elena was screaming. Her heart was beating so hard, she felt it in her throat. She gripped Adrian's arm, not out of affection, but because her legs felt like jelly. Chin up, Adrian murmured his voice, barely audible over the rain. Fear is blood in the water. If they smell it, they eat you. They reached the table. The captain stood up, some slowly, some with immediate respect. "Boss," said Victor, the oldest of the group, a man with a scarred face who ran the shipping docks. "We heard you were dead. We were making preparations." "Premature as always, Victor," Adrian said smoothly. He pulled out a chair for Elena. She sat crossing her legs, keeping her expression bored and icy, just as Adrian had coached her in the car. Adrian sat next to her, leaning back, claiming the space. "Gentlemen, I'd like you to meet Elena, my fiancée." Silence. Heavy, thick silence. The captains exchanged glances. Finally, Luca, a younger, aggressive capo with a reputation for being a hothead, laughed. It was a sharp, barking sound. "Fiancé," Luca sneered, looking Elena up and down. "Boss, with all due respect, Kieran is dead. The Onyx room is in shambles, and you walk in here with a piece of tail and a ring. We're at war with the Morettis, and you're playing house." Adrian's eyes darkened, but before he could speak, Elena moved. She didn't look at Adrian for permission. She looked directly at Luca. She remembered her father's files. She remembered the name Luca Rossi. He had been a low-level enforcer who worked his way up by being brutal, not smart. "Watch your mouth," Elena said. Her voice wasn't loud, but it cut through the room, "or I'll have Adrian cut it out." Luca's eyes widened. He slammed his hand on the table. "Who do you think you're talking to, girl? I'm talking to the man who skimmed 15% off the construct shipments last month." Elena lied. Well, it was a half-lie. Her father had suspected Luca of skimming years ago. She gambled that habits didn't change. "Do you think Adrian doesn't know he's been waiting for a reason to replace you? Don't give him one tonight." The room went deathly still. Luca turned pale. He looked at Adrian, panic flickering in his eyes. He hadn't skimmed 15%, he had skimmed 10. But the fact that she knew anything about the shipments terrified him. Adrian kept his face impassive, masking his own surprise. He turned to Luca, raising an eyebrow. "She has a sharp eye for ledgers, Luca. Unlike you." He reached out, taking Elena's hand on the table, rubbing his thumb over her knuckles. It was a display of dominance and unity. "Elena is not just my future wife," Adrian announced, his voice dropping to a lethal growl. "She is the only reason I am alive tonight. She killed the man who betrayed me. She is under my protection. Any disrespect to her is an act of treason against me." He pulled his gun, placing it on the table with a heavy thud. "Now, does anyone else have a problem with my engagement?" The captains shook their heads. "No, boss. Congratulations, boss." "Good," Adrian said. He holstered the weapon. Now to business. Kieran was bought. The Morettis paid him 10 million. But Kieran didn't have the contacts to set up the hit team. Someone brokered the deal. "We found something," Victor said, sliding a manila folder across the table. We tossed Kieran's apartment, found a burner phone taped under the toilet tank. Only one number in the call log. Adrian opened the folder. He stared at the number, then at the location ping. The Venetian Gala, Adrian read. Tomorrow night. Victor nodded. The Morettis are hosting a charity event at the Museum of Art. It's neutral ground, supposedly. All the families will be there. The broker is going to be there to collect the second half of the payment from the Morettis. Then we're going, Adrian said, standing up. Boss, it's a trap, Luca warned, though his voice was meeker now. Walking into a Moretti party after they tried to hit you, it's suicide. No, Adrian corrected, looking down at Eleanor. It's a statement. We walk in the front door, we smile, we drink their champagne, and while they are wondering why I'm not dead, we find the broker, and we find the Moretti who ordered the hit. He pulled Elena up. She stood her legs steadier now. The adrenaline of the confrontation was fading, replaced by a strange buzzing sensation. She had played the part. She had faced the wolves. Get the car, Adrian ordered. As they walked back to the SUV, the rain soaking them instantly, Adrian stopped before opening her door. He crowded her against the vehicle, shielding her from the downpour with his body. You have a dangerous tongue, Elena, he whispered, water dripping from his dark hair onto his forehead. Accusing a capo of skimming. You could have gotten us both shot. I was improvising, Elena breathed, looking up at him. They were inches apart. You said to act like a queen. Queens don't let pawns insult them. Adrian stared at her, his eyes searching her face. The rain blurred the world around them until it was just the two of them in the dark. You did good, he admitted, his voice rough. Arthur Vance raised a hell of a daughter. He leaned in. For a terrifying second, Elena thought he was going to kiss her. Her breath hitched. She didn't know if she wanted to slap him or pull him closer. Instead, he opened the car door. Get in. We have 24 hours to turn you into a socialite. If you thought tonight was hard, wait until you have to dance with the devil in a ballroom. The Chicago Museum of Art was a palace of light. Massive marble columns were draped in velvet, and crystal chandeliers the size of small cars illuminated the city's elite. Politicians, judges, and celebrities mingled with the sharks of the underworld. It was the one night of the year when the predators pretended to be civilized. Elena stood at the top of the grand staircase, her hand resting on Adrian's arm. She felt transformed. A team of stylists had descended on the penthouse that morning. Her hair was swept up in an intricate, elegant chignon, exposing the long line of her neck. She wore a gown of deep emerald velvet, strapless, with a slit that went up to her thigh, revealing a diamond garter that held a small ceramic knife. Metal detectors were at the door, but Adrian was prepared. Around her neck hung a necklace of diamonds and emeralds, worth more than the restaurant she used to work in. Breathe, Adrian whispered against her ear. He looked devastating, in a black tuxedo, his demeanor relaxed, arrogant. No one would guess he had stitched a bullet wound shut the night before. Everyone is looking at you. Give them a show. They're looking at the dead man walking, Elena corrected through a fake smile. Let them look. They descended the stairs. A hush fell over the room as they entered. The music didn't stop, but the conversation did. Eyes followed them, hungry, curious, fearful eyes. Adrian Volkov was alive, and he had brought a woman. They moved through the crowd like sharks in a reef. Adrian greeted people with polite nods, his grip on Elena's waist firm, possessive. Don't drink anything unless I hand it to you, he murmured, as they took champagne flutes from a passing waiter. Don't go to the bathroom alone. If I squeeze your waist twice, you drop to the floor. Romantic, Elena quipped. Practical. Suddenly the crowd parted. A man approached them. He was older, with silver hair and a face that looked like it had been tanned in leather. He wore a white tuxedo. Lorenzo Moretti, the head of the Moretti family, the man who ordered the hit. Elena's blood froze. She recognized him from the news clips 3 years ago. But behind him stood a younger man, bulky with a jagged scar running through his left eyebrow. Elena stopped breathing. The scar. She remembered the flash of the explosion, the man walking away from her father's car, turning back to smile. The scar through the eyebrow. It was him. The bomber. Adrian. Lorenzo Moretti smiled, spreading his arms. I heard a nasty rumor you had a stomachache. I'm glad to see you've recovered. It takes more than bad sushi to kill me, Lorenzo. Adrian smiled back. The air between them crackled with tension. I see you're hosting a lovely wake. Shame there's no body. Lorenzo's smile didn't falter, but his eyes went cold. He looked at Elena. And who is this enchanting creature? My fiancée, Adrian said. Elena. He didn't give a last name. Lorenzo took Elena's hand, raising it to his lips. His skin was dry and cold. Charmed. You must be a brave woman to marry a Volkov. Their life expectancy is statistically short. I like a gamble, Elena said, her voice shaking slightly. She couldn't take her eyes off the man with the scar standing behind Lorenzo. Lorenzo noticed her gaze. Ah, I see you've noticed Silas, my new head of security. He's very efficient. Silas. Elena repeated the name, etching it into her memory. Enjoy the party, Lorenzo said, dropping her hand. The waltz is starting. Do try not to trip. As the Morettis walked away, Elena grabbed Adrian's arm, digging her nails into his jacket. That's him, she whispered frantically. Who, Lorenzo? No. The guard. Silas, she hissed. He's the one who planted the bomb. He killed my father Adrian. I saw his face. Adrian's expression turned into a mask of pure, focused violence. He didn't question her. He didn't doubt her. Are you sure? 100%. Good, Adrian said. Then tonight we don't just find a rat. We kill a ghost. He grabbed 2 fresh glasses of champagne from a tray, handed one to her, and took a sip. The broker, Adrian said, scanning the room. Look for the man Silas is watching. Silas isn't guarding Lorenzo right now. Look at his eyes. He's watching the perimeter. He's waiting for someone. They moved to the edge of the dance floor. The orchestra began a slow, haunting waltz. Dance with me, Adrian commanded. Now. It's the best way to watch the room without being seen. He pulled her onto the floor. His hand settled on the small of her back, burning through the velvet. They moved together, a fluid rotation. For a moment, amidst the danger, Eleanor felt a strange sense of peace in his arms. He was a fortress. 3 o'clock, Adrian whispered near her ear, his lips brushing her skin. The man in the grey suit. Sweating. Checking his watch. Eleanor looked over Adrian's shoulder. It was a man she recognized. Not a gangster. A politician. Councilman Reeves, the head of the city zoning board. The councilman, Elena whispered. He controls the permits for the new port expansion, Adrian realized. If I die, the permits go to the Morettis. That's the deal. Kieran kills me. The councilman approves the Moretti permits, and Silas handles the dirty work. Silas is moving toward him, Elena said. The man with the scar was cutting through the crowd, heading for the nervous councilman. He wasn't going to pay him. He's going to kill him, Adrian said. Loose ends. If he dies, we lose our proof, Elena said. Stay here, Adrian ordered. No. Elena hiked up her dress, her hand brushing the ceramic knife on her thigh. "We do this together." Adrian looked at her, a fierce pride burning in his eyes. "On my signal. We cause a distraction." They spun toward the center of the room. As the music swelled, Adrian suddenly dipped her low, and as he did, he reached out and shoved a waiter carrying a tray of flaming cocktails. The tray went airborne. Crash! Fire erupted on the dance floor. Screams. Chaos. The crowd surged. "Now!" Adrian yelled. He drew his gun, God knows where he had hidden it, and fired 2 shots into the ceiling. The panic turned into a stampede. Adrian and Eleanor didn't run for the exit. They ran toward the councilman. Silas was already there, a suppressed pistol in his hand. He raised it to the councilman's head. "Hey!" Eleanor screamed. She pulled the ceramic knife from her garter and threw it. It was a desperate Hail Mary throw. It didn't hit Silas, but it shattered a vase next to his head. Silas flinched, turning around. He saw Eleanor. Recognition dawned on his face. The girl from the window. The witness. "You!" Silas growled. He abandoned the councilman and leveled his gun at Elena. Adrian slammed into Silas like a linebacker. The 2 men went down in a tangle of limbs and tuxedos. The gun skittered across the floor. "Get the councilman!" Adrian roared, punching Silas in the jaw. Elena scrambled toward Reeves. The politician was cowering on the floor. "Get up!" she yelled, grabbing his collar. "If you want to live, you come with me." She dragged the weeping man behind a marble pillar, just as bullets started flying from the balcony. Lorenzo's men were shooting. Elena looked back. Adrian and Silas were locked in a death struggle. Silas was bigger, stronger. He had his hands around Adrian's throat, squeezing the life out of him. Adrian's face was turning purple. He couldn't reach his gun. Elena looked at the councilman, then at the gun lying on the floor 10 feet away. She didn't think. She ran. Bullets chipped the marble floor around her feet. She slid on her knees, the velvet dress tearing, and grabbed the gun. It was heavy cold. She rolled onto her back, aimed with both hands, and screamed, "Get off him!" Silas looked up. He saw the girl. He laughed. "You won't shoot, little girl." Bang! Elena didn't hesitate. She fired. The bullet didn't kill him. She wasn't that good. But it tore through Silas's shoulder. He howled, releasing his grip on Adrian. Adrian gasped for air, coughed, and then surged upward. He grabbed a piece of the shattered vase from the floor and drove it into Silas's neck. It was brutal. It was final. Silas slumped over dead. Adrian stood up, staggering. He looked at Elena, who was still on the floor, holding the smoking gun, her chest heaving. He walked over to her, oblivious to the gunfire around them. He reached down and took the gun from her trembling hands. "You got him!" Adrian rasped. "You got him, Eleanor." He pulled her to her feet and kissed her. It wasn't a staged kiss. It was hard, desperate, fueled by survival and adrenaline. For a second the war stopped. Then he broke away. "We have the councilman. We have the proof. Now we leave." He grabbed the councilman by the scruff of his neck with one hand and took Elena's hand with the other. "Run!" They burst through the service exit into the cool night air, leaving the ruin of the gala behind them. They had started a war, but for the first time they were winning. The safe house was a converted loft in the meatpacking district, gritty industrial and completely off the grid. In the center of the room, Councilman Reeves sat tied to a wooden chair, sobbing. Adrian paced before him, his tuxedo jacket discarded, revealing the blood seeping through his bandage. He looked like a fallen angel, beautiful, terrifying, and running on pure rage. Elena stood by the window, the gun Adrian had taken from her, now tucked into the waistband of the oversized sweats he'd found for her. "Please," Reeves stammered. "I didn't know they were going to kill you. Lorenzo just said he wanted to disrupt your supply chain. Disrupt? Adrian laughed, a dark sound that echoed off the brick walls. He sent a hit squad to my dinner table and blew up my car. That isn't disruption, Reeves. That's war. Adrian leaned down, gripping the chair. Lorenzo Moretti pays you to block my permits. And when you became a liability, he sent Silas to put a bullet in your brain. Who saved you? Reeves looked at Elena, trembling. She did. Exactly. My fiancé saved your miserable life. So now you belong to us. Adrian slammed a digital recorder onto the table. Start talking. Every bribe, every zoning violation, every dirty dime Lorenzo Moretti ever gave you. If you leave anything out, I open the door and let the Morettis finish what they started. Reeves broke. For an hour, he detailed a decade of corruption, providing enough evidence to put Lorenzo away for 3 lifetimes. When the recorder clicked off, Adrian turned to Elena. The adrenaline was fading, leaving behind a heavy exhaustion. You should go, Adrian said quietly, refusing to look at her. My men are outside. They'll take Reeves to the feds. I have a jet fueled up and 10 million in an account in the Caymans. You're free, Elena. Elena blinked the words, hitting harder than a bullet. Free. You got your revenge. Silas is dead. Lorenzo is finished. You don't need to be in the crossfire anymore. Go to Paris. Start over. Is that what you want? She asked, stepping closer. You're deciding for me. Just like you told me to get in the car. I can't ask you to stay in this life, Elena. It's blood and bullets. You almost died tonight. I didn't survive 3 years on the run to be scared of a little crossfire. She countered fiercely, grabbing his face and forcing him to look at her. I was a target when I was a nobody. At least with you, I'm a target who shoots back. She placed his bruised hand over her heart. I don't want Paris. I want Chicago. And I want the man who owns it. Adrian's resolve crumbled. He pulled her into a desperate, consuming kiss. You're mine, he growled. If you stay, there are no exits, no annulments. Deal, she breathed. 2 days later, the headlines screamed the news: Mafia Don arrested, Lorenzo Moretti in custody. The Moretti empire had crumbled overnight, but the real story was the photo on the front page of the Chicago Tribune, Adrian Volkov standing tall at the courthouse, with Eleanor by his side, looking directly at the camera with a challenging stare. They sat in the back of the Rolls-Royce as it glided toward the spire. The board is clear, Adrian said, closing his tablet. We won. We won. Elena agreed. Adrian reached into his pocket and pulled out a velvet box. Inside wasn't the heirloom ring from before, but a rare black diamond set in dark gold. The other ring was a prop for the show, Adrian said softly, taking her hand. This is for the reality. I don't want a fake fiancée, Elena. I want a partner, a wife. Will you marry me for real this time? Eleanor looked at the ring, then at the man who had changed her world with a single look in a restaurant. She realized she had never been safer or more alive. She smiled, a dangerous expression that matched his own. Only if I get to keep the shotgun. Adrian laughed, pulling her into a kiss. Everything I have is yours, Mrs. Volkov, including the shotgun. The waitress who served the warning was gone. The Queen of Chicago had taken her throne, and that is how a single napkin toppled an empire. They thought she was just a waitress, invisible and weak. They thought he was just a target, arrogant and blind. But together, Adrian and Eleanor proved that in a world of wolves, it's not the size of the dog in the fight, it's the loyalty in the heart. She didn't just save his life, she saved his soul. And he gave her the one thing she couldn't find on her own justice. What a ride. I still get chills thinking about that scene at the gala. Now, I have a question for you guys. If you were in Elena's shoes, working that shift at the restaurant, and you saw that text message, would you have slipped the note? Or would you have walked away to save yourself? It's a tough choice. Let me know what you would do in the comments below. If you enjoyed this story of revenge, romance, and high-stakes drama, please smash that. Like button it really helps the channel. And don't forget to subscribe and hit the bell icon so you never miss the next crazy story. We upload every week. Thanks for watching and stay safe out there.